Welcome to the show. Today we have a fascinating topic to discuss. We're going to be talking about how shoes are linked to neocolonialism. Our guest today is an expert in this field. Please welcome Dr. Justin Monk.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show, Joe.
Before we start, can I ask what made you interested in this topic? It's so unique. I wonder how people can get interested.
Well, it's actually a funny story. When I was younger, I was really into shoes. I really liked the new Jordans. I really liked the new Dunks. I remember I'd scroll through apps, scroll through web pages to see the new prices, when new shoes were coming out. It was really cool. But over
Oh,
time, I
wow.
noticed that the origin of these shoes was very unethical, and they were tied to some very gross and disgusting things. And I noticed a lot of other people either didn't know or didn't care about all these terrible things that happen in the shoes that we wear and how they're created and the source of these. So it became my duty to take these historical concepts and
Oh,
then break
wow.
them down into more simplistic ones so that a larger portion of the audience can understand exactly the, the I guess just the weird stuff that goes on behind the production of our shoes that we wear.
Understand you have been studying links between consumerism and colonialism. Can you explain how these two objects are in any way alike? It just seems like people are trying to connect things that aren't related.
Yes, of course. To understand the link between shoes and neocolonialism, we must examine the history of shoe production and trade. Many people think that our trade differs from how we traded hundreds of years ago due to scientific advancements in refrigeration, bigger and faster ships, and radar technology. However, according to researchers from The Cut, today's trade routes are similar to those formed during the Age of Exploration. Many countries, European countries, released their subjects shortly after World War II, but we still traded in the same patterns. These former colonies, weak and without stable governments or strong economies, were forced.
Hold on a second. You initially said shoes and colonies are connected, but now you're saying this happened after World War II when America was its own country for hundreds of years.
We're not talking about America. We're talking about the South Asian colonies the European powers held on to for centuries after the American Revolution, like Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. As European powers expanded their territories, they established trade networks across continents. These massive networks allowed them to extract resources from their colonies and exchange them for goods in other parts of the world. Trade research on the Bengal region has found trade routes and patterns massively changed after imperialist Britain invaded, and trade patterns have stayed mainly the same even after decolonization. Shoes as well as other clothing items were both produced and exported from these colonies. For centuries, Western countries have exploited the resources of developing countries, including cheap labor.
Okay, I see where you're going with this, but why did these countries seek out colonization?
In the 1800s, many Europeans falsely believed they demonstrated superior intellect to other groups, leading to a race to colonize as much land as possible. This led to different countries seeking out lands such as Spain in Central America, Belgium in Africa, and Britain in South Asia. Western countries then manipulated the growth of these colonies into sending raw resources such as rubber and spices to their home countries for trade. Soon, the Europeans sought to assert their dominance and control over these new lands, and one way to achieve this was by imposing their own culture upon the native populations.
Oh,
This
wow.
cultural imposition included the introduction of European clothing styles and footwear, which were often seen as more refined and civilized compared to the local customs. By dressing European clothing and shoes, the locals were expected to adopt European manners and values, making it easier for the colonizers to govern and exploit these new territories.
So how does this relate to modern shoes? We're talking about all these goods in trade from hundreds of years ago, but how is it relevant?
Well, one problem was that European countries forced their colonies to focus only on production for
Oh,
centuries.
wow.
This exploitation destroyed local governments and their ability to be self-sufficient.
Oh,
In the
wow.
Belgian colony of the Congo, upwards of 10 million perished under the brutal rule of King Leopold II.
Oh, wow.
During the British Raj in India, it is estimated that between 15 and 29 million people died due to famine caused by British policies, such as the export of grain to Europe and the imposition of high taxes on Indian farmers. Under Portuguese rule of Goa, it is estimated that up to 200,000 people were killed due to forced labor, disease, and violence.
Wow, that's terrible. What ended these brutal occupations?
During the later 1900s, we saw a rise in decolonization for many reasons. After World War II, much of Europe was destroyed over fighting,
Oh,
leading to
wow.
weakened powers unable to maintain control over colonies effectively. Meanwhile, a rise of nationalism led to settlements and colonies questioning why they were allowing themselves to be ruled over by others.
So the colonies were free, right? How did they end up producing shoes for their former owners?
Even after colonies were released, many problems remained. Decades of exploitation had left many places scarred and wounded. Colonizer had built whole economies and government systems around exploitation, so when they were freed, colonies were left with weak systems. To be clear, neocolonialism is when developed countries use economic, political, and cultural power to control developing countries. When these countries were first released, large multinational companies flooded in with investments in the form of infrastructure and jobs for cheap labor in return. Western shoe companies perpetuate neocolonialism by exploiting workers in developing countries for consumer goods. Multiple reports, such as the International Monetary Fund, show a massive power imbalance between Western countries and developing countries on trade, where for every $90 of profit a sweatshop worker generates, they take home $3.33.
Oh, wow.
This exploitation makes it difficult for these developing countries to forge self-sufficient economies.
Wow.
Yeah, you know what, Joe, could you actually pull up some of the images I sent you before the podcast? I think it would be kind of helpful in getting the message across.
Right away, Dr. Monk. Let me see what I can do.
Yeah, sure. I guess either Joe works. I mean, either one.
Despite his age, he's actually pretty good with editing.
Here you go.
Wow, what is this?
Yeah, so this is kind of the meat and potatoes of what I was trying to get to today. At the end of the day, we see on the top trade routes from 600 years ago, and we see at the bottom trade routes from today, and there are some minor differences, but they're remaining largely the same.
Oh, wow.
Some of that is geographical, but a lot of that is just simply the infrastructure that was built hundreds of years ago, remained over time, and those became popular trade routes, and those remain today. These effects have been massive on just how we conduct trade. Whole countries, whole wars have been fought over these geographical regions and the trade routes created from them. I really wanted to bring this picture and to highlight this idea. Thank you, Jeff.
I have to go eat ice cream and forget my grandson's name, but before I go, here's the final image you sent.
Thank you, Joe. This is the final picture I wanted to put in here. I think it really drives my point home. It does a good job of connecting everything. First, we take a look at the top photo. To remove the America confusion from earlier, we're only going to look at colonies from the 1930s, not from the 1770s. And if we look, we see some colonies in North America, some in a little tiny bit in South America, but a large majority of colonies as of the 1930s are in Africa and Southeast Asia. Then we look at the middle one. The middle picture shows modern slavery rates today. And as we can see, there's a large correlation, large overlap between countries that were colonies 90 years ago
wow.
and have high rates of slavery today. This directly shows how places that were colonized 90 years ago still suffer economically today from that. And that does make sense. 90 years isn't exactly enough to get over centuries of exploitation. The final photo is modern day Nike distribution of different industries. If we look, some of their research is in America, a developed country. Their distribution centers are pretty evenly around the world, Saudi Arabia, Europe, America. But if we look at manufacturing, it's almost all in Southeast Asia. It's just almost all there. And that's meant to reflect how countries damaged economically are often exploited by these large multinational companies. So, just to be clear, I think this picture does a really good job of driving home how colonization from 90 years ago creates damaged countries economically today, which multinational companies like Nike take advantage of.
Oh, I get it. Even though colonization ended in many of these countries decades ago, the effects are still apparent.
Exactly. Shoe companies are taking advantage of the low wages paid to workers in developing countries to produce shoes at a lower cost. This allows them to sell shoes at a lower price in Western countries and make a higher profit margin.
Thank you for shedding light on this crucial topic. It's something we all need to think about more. Thank you for being on the show, Dr. Monk.
Thank you for your time, Joe. I really appreciate it.